My name is Wade. I am 38 years old, and today, I just opened a very expensive bottle of wine. I'm not celebrating an anniversary. I'm celebrating a news report from the courthouse. The man who turned 2 years of my life into a living hell was just denied parole. What I'm about to tell you is the story of the nightmare he put me through. It all started 10 years ago after my 4-year marriage ended. I moved to Asheville, a peaceful mountain town in North Carolina, to start over. I worked as a bartender at a local spot where I met all kinds of people. I became friends with a kind couple who ran a horse rescue. They were good people, and through them, I met Gavin. At the time, Gavin worked at my friend's rescue ranch. He had a rugged look and talked a bit rough, but I just thought he was a straightforward guy. One night, after having a few too many drinks, we had a one-night stand. It should have ended right there. I really didn't have any interest in a relationship with him, but he felt differently. Over the next few weeks, I received roses from a secret admirer on 3 separate occasions. At first, I thought it was a sweet, romantic gesture, but it quickly turned creepy. When he finally reached out and realized I'd received the flowers, he bluntly told me that because he had spent so much money on them, I owed him. I was absolutely shocked. If he had been a gentleman, I might have actually considered a real date. But the way he demanded intimacy just because he spent money made me feel like I was just a product to him. I got angry and told him exactly how I felt. He immediately snapped, calling me names and accusing me of being a tease. I didn't hold back either. I told him off and hung up, thinking that was the end of it. Then, the tense run-ins began. About 2 weeks later, I was out with friends when we ran into him at a bar. He was wasted, and he acted like he'd forgotten everything that happened. When I told him to stay away, he got aggressive and even groped me. I immediately told security, and they kicked him out of the bar. I was terrified he would try to get back at me, so I asked a guard to walk me to my car. Just as I feared, he was waiting for me in the parking lot. Thankfully, because of the security guard, I made it away safely. The breaking point happened on a rainy night. He showed up at my house, sobbing hysterically outside my door. He was begging me for a chance to fix our serious relationship. He was so delusional that he believed one night together meant we were in eternal love. I had to call the police to force him to leave. After that night, he vanished. I thought the nightmare was finally over. However, stalkers never truly leave. They just step back and wait for a more devastating moment to strike. By this time, I had a new boyfriend. We had been together for 6 months, and he had recently moved in with me. One evening, we were sitting on the couch watching TV when we heard a violent pounding at the door. My boyfriend stood up to see who it was when the door was kicked so hard the entire frame shattered. Gavin charged in like a wild animal, brandishing a handgun. His eyes were bloodshot, and he reeked of alcohol. The second he saw my boyfriend, he pulled the trigger without saying a word. My boyfriend collapsed after the first shot. In a state of pure terror, I bolted for the bathroom, locked the door, and dove into the bathtub. I heard at least 3 more gunshots in the living room along with his slurred cursing. I was certain the man I loved was dead. I tried to keep it together and felt for my phone. Luckily, it was still in my pocket. I shakily dialed 911 while he continued to scream outside the door. He began firing rounds into the bathroom door and the lock. I didn't dare make a sound. I lay flat in the bottom of the tub, hoping the cast iron would shield me if he shot through the walls. Waiting for the police felt like waiting for a death sentence. Fortunately, I heard sirens very quickly. I heard the police shouting, the sound of a struggle, and then total silence. A miracle happened. My boyfriend was still alive. Gavin was so drunk that his hands were shaking. 2 bullets hit my boyfriend, but they both missed his vital organs. He was rushed to the ER and made a miraculous recovery. At the trial, Gavin stood there looking pathetic and thin, nothing like the monster from that night. Because he had a long list of prior crimes, he was sentenced to 10 to 25 years in prison. My boyfriend and I celebrated that news with a wedding. We have been together for almost 10 years now. A relationship that started with a literal bang turned out to be the strongest bond of my life. Today, hearing that his parole was denied, I feel like I can finally breathe again after a decade of holding my breath. We are already planning a long vacation to celebrate this peace of mind. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community, let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories. My name is Bianca. I'm 23 years old and I live and work in Texas. If you met me during the day, you would see an energetic barista who always has a polite smile for her customers. But after a terrifying Wednesday night last week, I realized that politeness can sometimes be a trap, and acting crazy can be your most powerful, life-saving weapon. My shift usually ends at 10 p.m. My apartment is only about a 10-minute walk from the coffee shop. Because it's so close, I choose to walk to save money. I always felt confident that I could protect myself because I stayed on the main roads with bright streetlights and plenty of traffic. That night, I finished work like usual and started my walk home. But not long after I left the shop, I got a strange feeling. I felt like someone was behind me. I kept walking but glanced quickly over my shoulder. About 15 feet behind me was a man. He was dressed in dark clothes. I kept moving and tried to act normal since he hadn't done anything dangerous yet. A few minutes later, I peeked back again. I realized he was keeping the exact same pace and distance as me. I stayed calm, thinking it might just be a coincidence. To test it, I turned onto a different street, a smaller one, but still well lit. My heart skipped a beat when I heard his footsteps follow me around the corner. I decided to take a defensive step. I pretended to pull out my phone and stopped for a few seconds, as if I were reading a text message. Then, I suddenly turned around and headed back toward the main road. As I brushed past him, my heart nearly stopped. I could feel how big and tall he was. I felt certain that if he grabbed me, I wouldn't stand a chance. He quickly turned around and followed me back to the main road. Now I was certain I was being stalked. His footsteps rang out steadily behind me. In the silence of the late night, that sound felt like death knocking on my door. My palms were so sweaty that my phone was slipping in my hand. I looked around, hoping to see anyone who could help, but the street was eerily empty. Suddenly, he sped up to close the gap and spoke. "Hey there, beautiful." I didn't dare look back. I forced my body to stop shaking. I ignored him and put my phone to my ear, pretending to be on a call. "Hey, I'm on the main road. You'll be here in a minute, right?" I said. I tried to keep my voice from trembling. I hoped he would back off if he thought I wasn't alone. But his reaction was completely unexpected. He let out a loud laugh that made me freeze. "Nice acting, sweetheart," he sneered. "But I'm a pretty good director myself. I know you're all alone." In that moment, I felt paralyzed. My usual escape plan had been ripped to shreds. I felt a wave of cold fear rise from my feet, making my legs feel weak. I felt like I was going to collapse and beg for mercy. That was exactly what he wanted. He wanted to see me cry. He wanted to hear me plead. He wanted me to play the role of the weak prey so he could have total control. But right then, something inside me snapped. A primal rage washed over my fear. I realized that if I kept acting like a normal, polite person, I wasn't going to make it home tonight. I stood up straight and whipped around to face him. Instead of a crying face, I bared my teeth and widened my eyes until they looked bloodshot. I started twitching my body in a bizarre, jerky way. Then, I took a deep breath and barked at the top of my lungs. "Woof! Woof, woof! Bark, bark, bark!" He stopped dead in his tracks. That disgusting smirk froze on his face. I didn't stop. I took jerky, lunging steps toward him, staring him down with wild eyes. I purposefully let spit fly from my mouth and barked like a rabid dog having a seizure. "Woof! Bark, 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 bark!" He backed away. "You're crazy. What's wrong with you?" Then, as if he was afraid my insanity was contagious, he turned around and walked away as fast as he could. He didn't look back once. As soon as he disappeared, my entire body went limp. My arms and legs shook so hard I could barely stand. I was gasping for air because I was so exhausted, but I forced myself to run the rest of the way home. When I got inside, I locked every bolt on the door, closed the curtains tight, and collapsed onto the cold floor. I started sobbing. I cried to let out all the extreme stress I had been holding in. I had saved myself in a way that wasn't exactly normal. The next day, I shared my experience online and learned an interesting biological term: diametic behavior. In nature, when a weaker animal is cornered, it will suddenly change its appearance, make piercing noises, or act in a bizarre way to confuse the predator. A predator wants a predictable hunt, not a confrontation with unpredictable chaos. A lot of women replied to my post with similar script-breaking stories. One woman pretended to vomit. Another started talking loudly about having explosive diarrhea. Some even faked seizures or started babbling in made-up languages. Harassers crave control. When you become crazy, you take that power away from them. They don't know how to handle someone who refuses to follow social norms. I learned a hard lesson that night. Never be afraid to be weird to protect yourself. Politeness is a virtue, but in a dark alley, it can be a death sentence. I don't walk home anymore. I always carry pepper spray now, and I've joined a martial arts class. But the strongest weapon I carry is my willingness to let go of my image and get crazy whenever I need to. Just remember, bad guys might not be afraid of the police immediately, but they are terrified of a woman they can't control. I 10 out of 10 recommend forgetting your dignity if it means staying safe. My name is Maya. 7 years ago, when I was 22, I made a mistake born out of kindness and a bit of naivety. I truly believed that everyone deserved to be treated with compassion. At the time, I was a senior majoring in fine arts at the University of Illinois. The story began on a Tuesday afternoon while I was sitting in a coffee shop with my best friend, Brad. We were discussing our final senior project when a beautiful opera melody drifted in from the window. It was clear, powerful, and full of emotion. I looked out of curiosity and saw a man who appeared to be homeless sitting on the curb, singing his heart out. I told Brad how incredible his voice was, but Brad didn't seem to care. He just shrugged it off. When we left the shop, I stopped by the man, pulled out a $10 bill, and dropped it into his hat. He stopped singing, opened his eyes, and smiled at me. "Thank you, young lady. You have a beautiful smile," he said. After that, I ran into him a few more times on street corners and near the subway station. Every time I saw him, I stopped to chat. I learned his name was Todd, and he was 53. He told me he used to be a promising opera singer, but after his wife died of cancer, he spiraled into substance abuse and lost everything. I saw Todd as a forgotten artist's soul rather than a threat. To me, he was a person, not a problem. Todd started giving me small gifts during our next few encounters. A wildflower picked from the roadside, or a small, smooth stone he found. They were sweet in their own way, and it always warmed my heart to receive them. Brad was visibly uncomfortable after watching me linger to talk to Todd. He warned me that I should just offer help, not build a friendship with a homeless man I didn't truly know. I disagreed with Brad's cynical view. I kept doing what I thought was right and kind. Then March 2020 arrived, and the world changed forever. COVID-19 hit, and Chicago went into lockdown. Classes moved online. I decided to move back home to Traverse City, Michigan to stay with my parents. I figured the 400-mile distance would naturally end this strange chapter. Until one night, Brad sent me a DM on Instagram. It was a video of a man singing opera right in the middle of downtown Traverse City. My heart stopped when I recognized him. It was Todd. "I ran into some people near your old hangout last week," Brad texted. "They said a homeless guy has been going around asking about you. He knew your name, your major, and even your home address in Traverse City." I was confused and shaken by Brad's message. He told me to call the police, but I brushed it off, thinking it had to be a huge coincidence. But when I told my parents, they had the same worried reaction as Brad. They decided it was best for me to go stay with my older brother, Ethan, in Columbus, Ohio, just to be safe. I agreed and went along with the plan, figuring it was just a good excuse to visit family. After I had been in Columbus for a week, I was home alone one afternoon when the doorbell started ringing repeatedly. I looked out the second-floor window down at the front porch. I realized it was Todd, but what shocked me was how clean he looked. He was well-groomed, wearing decent clothes, nothing like the homeless man I knew. I felt a wave of dread. How did he find me? Why did he look like this? Was Brad right all along? Todd kept knocking persistently. Suddenly, he looked up and spotted me. His eyes lit up instantly, and he broke into a massive, radiant smile. "Found you! Come on out, my dearest Maya!" He stood on his tiptoes and waved his hands frantically. I shivered and backed away from the window, but Todd didn't stop. "I spent every penny I begged for to get this look just for you," he shouted. I slammed the window shut and called my brother immediately. Outside, Todd started singing opera, intense, romantic songs of devotion. It made my skin crawl. About 10 minutes later, my brother Ethan pulled into the driveway. I stood by the living room window to listen, too scared to go out. Todd kept introducing himself as my boyfriend, while Ethan told him to leave immediately. Ethan has a short fuse, and the situation escalated fast. Todd moved toward the door, but Ethan blocked him. They started shoving each other. In a split second, Todd spun around and punched his fist right through the glass window I was standing behind. The sound of shattering glass was deafening. Blood splattered everywhere from Todd's hand. He saw me through the broken pane, and his eyes glazed over with madness. "My sweet Maya, I'm here. I couldn't stand seeing you so close to that Brad guy. Only I truly understand you." I collapsed onto the floor, screaming in a total panic as I saw his bloody hand reaching through the broken glass, trying to fumble for the door lock. Thankfully, the police arrived seconds later because Ethan had called them on his way home. It took 3 officers to tackle and handcuff Todd while he was in a blind rage. His hand was soaked in blood, but he had a terrifying, eerie smile on his face as he began to sing opera again. As the patrol car pulled away, his voice echoed down the street until it faded into the distance. I'm still shaken up by what happened. It's hard to believe that a simple act of kindness led to such a terrifying situation. I've realized that while empathy is important, blind trust can be dangerous. Not everyone who has suffered is harmless. Most importantly, I learned that no matter how much I want to help others, I have to keep myself safe first. My name is Hannah. I'm 22 years old, and I just graduated with a degree in environmental science from UC Berkeley. The story I'm about to tell happened a few months ago. At the time, I was part of a conservation program called AmeriCorps. It was a 2-year commitment in a very remote town in the American West. I had decided to take a break from my studies to get some real-world field experience. The town was tucked away between massive cliffs and open fields. There was only one 50-mile highway that connected us to the nearest big city. It was a total dead zone. There was no cell service, no streetlights, and only a few random farmhouses miles away from the road. It happened late one night in December after I finished watching a horror movie at the theater. It was past 11 p.m. I was driving home alone on a 10-mile stretch of road that twisted through barren hills and thin forests. On the way back, I stopped at the only gas station still open at that hour to fill up my tank. As soon as I pulled in, I got a bad feeling. The place was dark, and the flickering fluorescent lights were creepy. It reminded me exactly of the horror movie I had just seen. I pumped my gas, paid, and got back in the car. That's when I noticed a black Jeep parked at the pump next to me. At first, it looked like a normal car, but what made my skin crawl was the driver. He was staring at me intensely through his windshield. It was the kind of look you only see in movies about serial killers or kidnappings. I left the gas station quickly. In my rearview mirror, I saw the black Jeep pull out at the exact same time. At first, I tried to tell myself it was just a coincidence. Maybe he was just heading home too. But when the Jeep kept a perfect distance behind me, no matter how fast or slow I went, I started to get really scared. After following me for about 2 miles, the Jeep suddenly sped up. He roared past me and disappeared over a hill up ahead. I breathed a huge sigh of relief. I told myself I was just being dramatic and overthinking things. But as I crested the hill, my heart sank. The Jeep was pulled over on the shoulder with its headlights shining bright. The driver was leaning his arm out the window, waving his hand frantically as if he had a major emergency and needed help. For a split second, my mind raced. I didn't stop, but I hesitated. What if he actually broke down? What if someone was really hurt? Then I remembered the way he stared at me at the gas station. I decided not to stop. I kept my speed steady and looked straight ahead. As I passed him, I caught a glimpse of him. He was a pretty big guy. I kept checking my taillights in the mirror. Just as I was about to go around a curve, the Jeep suddenly lurched forward. He sped up and closed the gap between us instantly. I was shocked. His car clearly wasn't broken. I realized my gut feeling had been right all along. The guy wouldn't give up. He got right on my bumper, then sped past me again and stopped dead in the middle of the road. He leaned out the window and started waving me down again. This creep was definitely playing a game. I gritted my teeth, gripped the steering wheel tight, and floored it. I swerved around him without even looking his way. When he saw that I still wouldn't stop, the man turned absolutely aggressive. He began tailgating me so closely that I couldn't even see his headlights in my mirror. Then, he did something terrifying. He turned off his lights completely. In the pitch-black mountain night, all I could hear was the roar of his engine right behind me. He started honking his horn non-stop and flashing his brights to blind me, all while waving his arm out the window to force me to pull over. The chase lasted for over 30 minutes. It was the longest 30 minutes of my life. The mountain road was winding, with a cliff on one side and a deep drop-off on the other. One small bump from behind, and I would have disappeared into the canyon, and no one would have ever known. My phone was in my bag on the passenger seat, but I didn't dare take my hands off the wheel for even a second. I could feel cold sweat running down my back. My left hand was white-knuckled on the wheel, while my right hand scrambled to find my pocket knife in the center console. I flicked the blade open and put it on my lap. I told myself, if he forces me to stop, I'm not going down without a fight. My head was spinning with scenes from every highway horror movie I'd ever seen. The road was so empty that I didn't see a single car coming the other way. I was completely on my own. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it ended. As I got close to the turnoff for my town, the Jeep slammed on its brakes. I heard the tires screech against the pavement. In the mirror, I saw him pull a 180-degree U-turn and floor it back into the darkness. I sped up and didn't stop until I reached my driveway. I ran inside and locked every single bolt on the door. I didn't calm down until almost sunrise, which is when I finally fell asleep. The next day, I told my friends what happened. Everyone had a different opinion. The most ridiculous one came from my friend Sarah. She said, maybe he just wanted to return some money or a receipt you dropped at the gas station. I told her that chasing someone for half an hour, turning off your lights, and honking like a maniac is not how a good person acts. I called the police and described the Jeep and the man. They told me they didn't have enough information to open an investigation. They just told me to be more careful at night and to always keep my phone nearby. 3 months later, I was getting ready to move out of town to go back to Berkeley. Right before I left, Sarah told me some shocking news. The black Jeep had been pulled over and the driver was arrested. It wasn't because of my case, though. He had tried to follow a group of 4 men who were driving to work early in the morning. This time, they managed to get his license plate number. I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders knowing he was caught. When he was chasing me, I was sure he was a predator targeting women. But after hearing what happened with the 4 men, I started to think differently. Maybe he was just mentally ill and got a thrill out of scaring people. There was no way he could have taken on 4 grown men at once. Whatever his reason was, I'm just lucky I stayed safe. I learned my lesson. I will never drive or go out alone late at night ever again.
My name is Adam. I'm 36 years old. I live a simple life, working as a supervisor at a warehouse in suburban Pennsylvania. I never thought I would become the victim of someone's madness on my usual drive home. That afternoon, I was driving my Ford pickup truck home after a long 10-hour shift. The sunset turned the road golden. The radio was playing a slow country song. I just wanted to get home and sit on my living room sofa. As I drove through a few blocks, I noticed a gray sedan behind me. At first, I thought we were just taking the same route. A few minutes later, at an intersection, the car was still there. I decided to test it. I tapped my brakes and slowed down to see if I was just being paranoid. The car behind me slowed down immediately. When I turned a corner, I took a quick look. I saw a woman behind the wheel. She looked exhausted. Her hair was in a high bun. In the back seat, 3 kids were crowded together. I thought maybe she was just headed in the same direction as me. I sped up and passed a few slow cars in the left lane. To my surprise, the gray sedan changed lanes too. It stayed right on my tail like a shadow. A strange feeling started to grow inside me. Why would a mother with 3 small kids act like a stalker? I saw a 7-Eleven sign ahead. I decided to pull into the parking lot. At least that would prove if this was a coincidence or if something was really wrong. But as soon as I came to a full stop, there was a violent crash from behind. My whole truck shook. The impact threw me forward. I felt like I was being ripped out of my seat. If my seatbelt hadn't held me back, I probably would have hit the windshield. I opened my door and stepped out. When I turned around, I froze. It was the same gray sedan. It was pinned against the back of my truck. The right headlight was smashed. Smoke was rising from the hood. I stood there, my head spinning. I couldn't believe she actually rammed into me. The woman got out of her car. She wasn't scared or sorry at all. She ran toward me. Her eyes were wide. Her pupils were so dilated it was terrifying. "Why are you following me? Why are you stalking me and my kids?" she screamed. Her voice was raspy and ear-piercing. I stood there in shock. Common sense didn't apply here. "What are you talking about? You're the one who was following me. You just hit my truck. Don't lie to me. I saw you slow down to look at me. Then you sped up to run away when I caught you," she shrieked. She stepped closer. I realized that in her world, my self-defense was proof of my guilt. I held up my hands to try to calm her down. I tried to stay as steady as possible. "Look, this is a big misunderstanding. I'm just on my way home from work." Before I could finish, a painful punch hit my left cheek. I stumbled back. I could taste the metallic flavor of blood in my mouth. "Stupid man. You think you can stalk people and get away with it?" she yelled in my face with pure hatred. While we waited for the police, she wouldn't stop rambling. She kept pointing her finger at me and screaming nonsense. "I knew it. You people are always watching me. You're sick." Her voice was a raspy hiss. People in the parking lot started to stop and stare. I stayed still and kept my distance. The 3 kids sat in her car, staring out with expressionless faces. It gave me the creeps. When the police officer arrived, He quickly separated us to take our statements. The woman kept accusing me with stories that made no sense. She has a very serious mental health issue, I told the officer when he came back to me. She didn't even care about the lives of her 3 kids in the car. She just rammed into me because of a delusion. The officer nodded. He looked sympathetic, but also helpless. After the paperwork was done, I got back into my truck. My hands were still shaking on the steering wheel. I could still taste the blood from her punch. In the rearview mirror, I saw her still pointing at me and arguing with the cops. The 3 kids were still sitting quietly in the dark car. I drove away, but the look in her eyes and the silence of those kids haunted me the whole way home. I still don't understand why I became a target for that madness. I was just at the wrong place at the wrong time on a normal road. What haunts me isn't just her wild eyes. It's the creepy silence of those kids. It was like they were used to these outbursts. The scariest thing is when you become a villain in someone else's broken world, and there is no way to protect yourself. This story happened back when I was 9 years old, living in Kentucky with my mom. It started out as a normal Tuesday. My best friend was homesick with the flu, so for the first time in a long while, I had to walk home from school by myself. My route took me across 2 busy intersections and through a quiet stretch near a park. About 10 minutes after leaving the school gates, I noticed a tall figure behind me. At first, I tried to stay calm, telling myself he was just heading the same way. But when I turned left, he turned left. When I slowed down to pretend to tie my shoelace, he stopped about 30 feet away and pretended to look at his phone. My chest started to tighten. I remembered what my mom always told me. Always trust your gut. Your safety is the most important thing. To check if I was really being followed, I ducked into a small convenience store nearby. I walked in and picked out a pack of peppermint candies, but my eyes kept darting toward the window. My worst fear was confirmed. The man appeared outside the store, pacing back and forth. I tried to act natural. I bought the candy and walked out. When I left, the man was still there. As I walked away, he started following me again. I started to panic and sped up, and he sped up too. I wanted to sprint, but I was afraid that if I ran, he would chase me, and I wouldn't be able to get away. I decided to keep up appearances. I usually took a shortcut with my friends to get home faster, but that day I chose the main road because there were more cars and people. Every few yards, I would wave or say hi to people walking by, pretending I knew them. I thought this would make me more visible and discourage him from trying anything. The walk from the store to my home had never felt so long. Finally, I reached my apartment building, but he was right on my heels and quietly slipped into the lobby right behind me. At this point, he stopped pretending. His terrifying gaze was fixed directly on me. The lobby suddenly felt suffocating. It was just me and this stranger. He wasn't looking at his phone anymore. He was just staring. I walked toward the elevator. My finger almost touched the call button, but a jolt of fear shot through my brain. In a split second, I changed my mind. I slowed down and walked toward the metal mailboxes in the corner instead. "Oh, I need to check the mail for Mom," I mumbled loud enough for him to hear. I stood there, pretending to fumble for my keys, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped my backpack. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw him waiting by the elevators. He wasn't in a rush. He knew I had no other way to get upstairs except by passing him. His patience was my only chance. The moment he looked up at the digital display to see which floor the elevator was on, I took a deep breath, spun around, and bolted for the front door. I shoved the lobby door open and ran for my life toward the parking lot outside. I heard the door slam behind me and the sound of heavy footsteps chasing me. Just then, Mr. Martin, a neighbor from across the hall, was getting out of his car after work. I lunged at him and grabbed his arm, crying and laughing at the same time because I was so scared. Mr. Martin, someone is chasing me. Mr. Martin froze, and his face went from confused to dead serious. He looked toward the lobby. The man had just poked his head out the door, but when he saw me standing next to a large, grown man, he immediately stopped, turned around, and slunk away into the shadows. Mr. Martin walked me up to my apartment and waited until my mom got home. When she heard the story, she pulled me into a hug and started crying. That same night, she called the building management and the police to pull the security footage. The CCTV showed everything. The man following me from the street into the lobby, waiting for me at the elevator, and then chasing me out the door. It was undeniable proof. My mom used the footage to file a report with the local police. It turned out the man was mentally unstable and under a doctor's care, but had stopped taking his medication. Even scarier, he had a history of stalking and harassing children in other neighborhoods. Because of what happened to me, he was placed in a secure mental health facility for mandatory treatment under tight security. To this day, I still shiver when I remember that man's eyes and the sheer terror of that afternoon. But I didn't let that fear break me. I turned it into a lesson. Now, I am a mother myself with a young daughter. I've taught her that the world has many good people, but it also has hidden dangers. I taught her that sometimes being polite or well-behaved has to take a back seat to survival. If you're scared, run. If you're suspicious, scream for help. 12 years have passed since that night, but I still can't forget the look in his eyes when he was looking at us from the shadows. Every time someone mentions camping, my heart beats faster. Those images come rushing back as if they had just happened. It was the last week of summer before I went back to the University of Texas, Austin. I was 20, and Jess and Katie were both 19. We decided to go on a hiking and overnight camping trip at Big Bend National Park. It was a place that the three of us had never been to. That afternoon, we drove from Dallas to Southwest Texas. On the way, I suggested we stop to buy some beer to drink around the campfire. Katie volunteered to go into the Shell gas station in Alpine to buy it, even though none of us were old enough. Jess and I waited in the car. We watched Katie walk into the store. 5 minutes later, Katie came back out with her hands empty and a disappointed look on her face. She shook her head when she opened the car door. We all understood. We decided to give up on the idea of drinking beer. We were about to leave when a voice from outside the driver's side window startled me. I turned and saw a young man. He had a friendly smile and bright eyes. There was nothing alarming about his appearance, but the way he suddenly appeared next to the car made me feel uneasy. He offered to buy the beer for us. We looked at each other blankly for a few seconds, but we finally agreed. We figured he was just a friendly person who wanted to help. He went into the store. 5 minutes later, he came back out with a cold case of beer. He gave Katie the change, but instead of leaving, he just stood there as if he was waiting for something. Katie thanked him again, but the man still didn't leave. I felt uncomfortable and quickly started the car. As we drove out of the gas station, I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw him still standing there. He watched us until we turned onto the main road. We went back to our camping trip. We didn't think much about it anymore. 2 hours later, we arrived at Big Bend and started our hike into the woods. The afternoon passed normally, but as dusk began to fall, I started to hear strange sounds. The sound of breaking branches, the rustling of leaves. Every time I turned to check, all I saw was the silent forest. I thought it might be wildlife, but the feeling of unease didn't leave me. When it got dark, we lit a campfire and drank our beer. The night air was chilly. The sounds of insects from everywhere created the familiar symphony of the wilderness. But suddenly, Jess stopped talking mid-sentence. She whispered and asked if we heard anything. We listened in silence. Something was moving in the bushes. Katie said it might be wildlife. We decided to go into the tent early. I lay in my sleeping bag, listening to the sounds around me. The wind blowing through the leaves, the sound of an owl hooting in the distance. And then, another sound. The sound of light footsteps. Slowly, it came closer to the tent. I whispered to Jess and Katie, but they were both asleep. The footsteps stopped right outside the tent. I held my breath. I closed my eyes tightly. I wished that the sound would go away. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps moved away. I waited another 10 minutes before I decided to go outside and check the campfire. I needed to make sure I put out all the embers to be safe. I slowly unzipped the tent and stepped outside. I grabbed my water bottle and walked toward the campfire. As I was bending down to put out the embers, a rustling sound right behind me made me freeze in place. I slowly turned around. I was shocked to see the man from the gas station standing just a few feet away. In the firelight, I clearly recognized his purple striped shirt and his face. What made me feel so cold wasn't that he had followed us for hundreds of miles from Alpine. It was the way he stood there, completely silent, just staring at me. I finally screamed at him to get away from me. The man didn't say anything. He took a step back. Then he turned and ran into the woods. I quickly ran back into the tent. My hands were shaking as I unzipped the zipper. I woke up Jess and Katie. I told them what had just happened. We panicked. We packed our things. We only used the light of a small flashlight. The hike back to the car was in tense silence. Every sound made us jump. Every shadow could have been him. None of us dared to speak loudly. We only whispered necessary directions. When we got back to the car, we quickly shoved our stuff in the trunk and drove out of the park. The entire way back to Dallas, no one talked about calling the police. We just wanted to get home safely as soon as possible. When we got to Jess's house around 3 a.m., I decided to call the local police in Alpine. I described the man and the incident at the gas station. Katie was worried that we would get in trouble for the beer, but I felt like I had to report it. The police officer took my statement, but he said they needed more concrete evidence to act. They promised to patrol the area more often. Years have passed. We never found out who that man was or what he wanted. Maybe he was just a person with strange behavior, but we can't rule out that he had more sinister intentions. I will never know the truth, but when I saw him standing there in the dark after having followed us all day, it was the feeling of a prey discovering the predator, and I will never forget it. 5 years ago, I was 30, working as an insurance salesperson in Los Angeles. This job often required me to work late, meeting all types of clients in various areas, and that evening was no exception. Around 11 at night, I was driving, searching for a parking spot near a low-income housing complex in South Los Angeles, where I needed to meet a client for the final contract signing of the day. This area always carried risks, and I was used to being vigilant. I was slowly rolling through a deserted alley when suddenly a shadow darted out of the darkness. The person's body slammed against the car window, making me jump and nearly scream. I immediately slammed on the brakes, feeling adrenaline rush. She pressed her face against the window, her eyes wide with panic, constantly banging on the door and pleading for my help. I was horrified to see her lip was torn and bleeding, along with clear bruises around her neck. Her long hair was messy, matted to her smeared face. Her panic seemed real. It couldn't be faked. I quickly glanced at the rearview mirror. The alley was completely empty. I didn't know the full story, but her condition was genuine. I didn't ask anything further. "Get in," I said, unlocking the passenger side door. She immediately scrambled in, her body shaking incessantly. I stepped on the gas, driving out of the alley. We were silent for a moment. Only when the car was on the main road did she start gasping and then sobbing as she recounted everything. She said that about 30 minutes earlier, while buying things at a convenience store, she was forced into a black van by two men. Taking advantage of a moment when one of the men was off guard, she struggled free and ran frantically through the dark streets until she saw my car. My first intention was to take her to the nearest police station immediately, but the girl firmly refused. "No," Please. If they see me reporting, they'll come for revenge. I'm so scared. The police will only make things more complicated, she said, her voice full of tears. Her fear seemed reasonable. I had heard many stories about revenge after prison time in these areas. I asked if I could drive her home, but the girl's attitude suddenly changed. No, don't take me home, she said decisively. Please take me to this address. She gave an address, saying it was a friend's house about 20 minutes away. This abrupt change made me slightly doubtful, but her pathetic expression wiped away all my suspicion. Compassion won. I agreed and started driving. On the way, my unease began to grow. I glanced in the rearview mirror and noticed a black SUV tailing us. A car with tinted windows, no headlights on, maintaining a safe distance. I told myself maybe it was just another driver. I sped up, and the SUV sped up too. I tried to turn abruptly into a narrow alley, and the SUV immediately followed. At this point, I was sure the other car was following me. You said you were followed by a black van earlier, right? Look behind us. Is that it? I asked the woman. At this point, she slightly turned her head, looked out briefly, and then remained silent. No confirmation, no denial. I continued gently but honestly. I think we should stop at the police station. If they're following you, going to your friend's house isn't safe. Immediately, her attitude changed completely. I told you I don't want to involve the police. Stop the car. I want to get out immediately. She spoke in a shouting, sharp, and cold voice. There was none of the panic she had when she rushed to my car for help, but you're in danger. If they're following, I can take care of myself. You don't need to interfere anymore. I braked at the roadside as requested. She opened the door and stepped out without hesitation. She rushed and immediately turned into a small, dark alley to the right. I stayed put behind the wheel. My emotions were a mess. Suspicion, anger, and most of all, a chilling fear. What the hell was going on? Why did she get angry when I mentioned the police? While I was still pondering, the black SUV slowly drove past my car and turned into the exact alley where she had disappeared. I sat there stunned. I felt like I had just escaped something dubious, and I needed to confirm it. I turned off my headlights, slowly turned the car around and kept a safe distance. I decided to follow the black SUV. 10 minutes later, I witnessed the entire plot unravel. The SUV stopped. The woman from before was not scared or resisting. She calmly stepped into the back seat of the SUV. They seemed to be talking, with no sign of force or abduction. That wasn't all. After a while, she got out of the car again, leisurely adjusted her hair and clothes, and quickly ran toward a white car parked not far away. She knocked on the car door, and immediately her face transformed. She reenacted the exact same scene she had performed for me, with a panicked expression and a trembling posture. I was stunned to realize it was all a carefully orchestrated scam. I wasn't the rescuer, I was the prey. They used my compassion to lure me to an isolated location, or to rob me right in the car. I didn't hesitate for a second. I immediately called the police, describing the white car and the two suspects. I drove, tailing the white car, keeping a distance far enough not to be noticed. Over the phone, the dispatcher told me to maintain my position, not to intervene, and wait for the nearest units to approach. It took almost 10 minutes for the first police car to appear at the end of the street. I quickly flashed my headlights as a signal. The car slowly approached, then suddenly accelerated, blocking the white car's path. Another officer from the second car stepped toward the driver's side door. They ordered the girl and the man to step out of the car. Her face instantly changed color, but it was too late. She was handcuffed and taken away, still vehemently claiming she was the victim. At the police station, she showed no remorse. In fact, she even counter-accused me and the man in the white car of kidnapping and assaulting her. Fortunately, the white car had a dash cam, which recorded the entire incident. Both I and the next potential victim were exonerated. A few days later, curiosity led me to drive to the address she had claimed was her friend's house. It was not a house, but an abandoned building, cordoned off for construction months ago. I could finally conclude her real goal was to lure me to an isolated location, completely separate from the residential area. It could have been for kidnapping, robbery, or extortion, but it was certainly a dangerous scheme. Everything, from the fake injuries, the pleading eyes, the change of address, to the constantly tailing SUV, was part of a meticulously planned script, likely part of an organized crime or scam ring. From then on, I never took unexpected pleas for help lightly again. Not everyone who looks desperate is truly a victim. That night, I not only escaped a scam, but also learned a costly lesson about trust. I worked the night shift at a Subway, a small shop next to a gas station where people stopped in a hurry on their way home. The smell of toasted bread, fresh vegetables, and deli meats mixed with the familiar greasy air of the kitchen. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling emitted a cold, harsh glow, reflecting off the glass counter full of bacon and sliced cheese. He started showing up about 2 weeks ago, a middle-aged man wearing a wrinkled shirt, his brown hair thin and greasy. He didn't cause trouble, just ordered a regular beef sandwich with extra mayonnaise. But what bothered me was his gaze. Every time I stood behind the counter, he stared at me. Not the casual glance of a customer, but a persistent, probing look. When I wrapped the sandwich, he asked me what my name was. When he paid, his hand lingered on mine longer than necessary. The next time he came back, still with that look. This time he complimented me, saying I was pretty. He asked if I wanted to go out after work. I smiled politely and declined. But he didn't stop. One night he called the shop, his voice deep and raspy. "Is this Glenda?" I froze. He knew my name. He asked where I lived. I hung up. I told my manager, but there wasn't much to be done about it. "Just a weird customer, don't worry." After that, he disappeared. I felt relieved, but that feeling didn't last long. One Friday night, I finished my shift at 11 p.m. It was colder than usual. The subway glass door reflected my pale face under the dim lights of the parking lot. I took off my apron, adjusted my messy hair before stepping outside. My brother, Mason, always told me to be more careful. He didn't like me working the night shift alone. "Guys like him could be following you, Glenda. If anything happens, call me." Mason had picked me up many times, especially after I told him about the creepy customer. He didn't like the way I shrugged it off when I talked about him, but I always thought Mason was overreacting. That night, I told Mason I could go home on my own, but just 10 minutes later, I wished I had listened to him. Near the exit, a figure stood under a streetlight. I froze. The person was dressed as a clown. A large, baggy red and white striped suit, a curly wig, and a face painted white with a bright red smile stretched unnaturally wide. The clown held out a red balloon to me, swaying lightly in the wind. I didn't move, not knowing how to react. The clown said nothing, just brought the balloon closer. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my chest. This had to be a joke, right? Someone hired a clown to mess with me? I reached out slowly, took the balloon. As soon as I grabbed it, he turned and walked away, quickly disappearing into the darkness. The balloon felt different, like it was heavier. I didn't think much of it, turning back toward my car. Suddenly, there was a loud pop. I jumped, the string of the balloon slipping from my hand. In an instant, a puff of white smoke shot out from the torn balloon, swirling into a thick cloud right in front of me. I gasped in shock, and immediately, The sharp chemical scent hit my nose, making my throat burn and tighten. A pungent odor overwhelmed all my senses, causing my stomach to twist. The more I coughed, the more white dust filled my mouth, my lungs. I staggered, my legs losing strength, and everything in front of me blurred. My throat felt dry. My heart pounded uncontrollably, out of rhythm. My ears rang, and all I could hear was the sound of my own labored breathing, desperate, as if I were drowning. Heavy footsteps pounded behind me. Darkness rushed toward me. He pressed on me. I heard his heavy breathing right next to my ear. I've been waiting a long time for this, Glenda. I struggled, but my limbs were weak. A loud yell rang out. Footsteps rushed forward, and his body was yanked away from me. I blinked, trying to regain my senses. Mason, my brother, stood there, his fists clenched, breathing heavily. The man crawled to his feet, but Mason was quicker. Another punch, this time harder, enough to knock him to the ground. He cursed and groaned, holding his face. The police arrived, and when the lights flashed on his face, I saw him clearly. The white paint on his face had smeared from sweat, revealing pale skin and greasy brown hair. It was none other than the regular customer at Subway. I froze. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I realized the truth. He had always been there, watching me, waiting. I saw Mason say something to the police, but my ears were ringing. He was arrested on the spot, and Mason took me to the hospital. After that, I quit my job at Subway. I still thought about him, regretting not listening to Mason. I wondered how long he'd been planning this. How many days had he been watching me? If Mason hadn't shown up, what would have happened? I remembered his face when he handed me the red balloon. It was the smile of someone who knew he was about to get exactly what he wanted. The traffic light turned green. I drove off, trying not to think about what had just happened. By chance, I glanced at the back seat through the rearview mirror, and there it was a red balloon, lying there, rolling on the seat. I don't know when it got there. I still remember that terrifying flight and his haunting face. His smile was so wide it showed all his yellowed teeth, and his eyes felt like they could pierce right through you. It was a beautiful August day. I was on my way from Columbus to Cleveland to meet Nick, a new boyfriend I'd met through a dating app. I booked a window seat to enjoy the view and avoid sitting next to strangers. But the moment Frank appeared, everything changed. He was about 60 years old. The scent of his cologne was so strong I had to lean towards the window. Whether by accident or on purpose, his knee brushed against my thigh when he sat down. I immediately pulled my legs in. Frank introduced himself with a wide smile, revealing his yellowed teeth. He asked me why I was going to Cleveland. I briefly replied that I was visiting friends, then opened the book in my hand and stared at it, trying to signal that I didn't want to talk anymore. But Frank didn't seem to get the hint. He chuckled, asking if I was going to meet a boyfriend. Then he started talking about his daughter, saying she was my age and just as pretty as me. I was really uncomfortable. I bent my head over my book, trying to focus on every word. Frank kept asking if I had Instagram or my phone number, saying he wanted to be friends. I politely refused. He didn't stop there. Frank complimented my skin, asking if he could touch it. I flinched and the book fell from my hands. I refused and seriously asked him to leave me alone. Frank just kept grinning, as if deliberately not understanding what I'd just said. He sat quietly for a few minutes, but his eyes kept staring, giving me goosebumps. I took out my headphones, put them on, and turned the music up as loud as possible, then looked out the window. Listen to me talk. The flight's too long. It's boring to sit in silence like this, he whined. I don't want to talk, I said bluntly. Frank laughed and started talking about his daughter again. I tried to ignore him, not wanting to bother the other passengers. But his voice still seeped into my ears, even with my headphones on. Sweat started to trickle down my palms. I glanced at the clock on my phone. 45 minutes left. Time felt like it was slowing down. Frank continued to ask what I did for a living. I closed my eyes, pretending to sleep, but a moment later, I felt his breath on my ear. "I know you're just faking it." I opened my eyes, startled and recoiled, telling him not to do that. Frank laughed with amusement. My heart pounded. I started to feel suffocated in the cramped space of the airplane cabin. His cologne seemed to grow stronger. Finally, the announcement that the plane was about to land brought me immense relief. As I stood up to get my luggage, I felt Frank's body pressed against my back, his breath on my neck, a hot, moist sensation that made me want to cry. I yanked my luggage from the overhead bin, pushed Frank away, and left as quickly as I could, hoping to leave him behind. But he still followed close. Frank asked if anyone was picking me up, offering to drive me home. I didn't answer, continuing to walk quickly toward the baggage claim area. At baggage claim, as I bent down to grab my suitcase, I felt someone touch my hair. I turned around and saw Frank standing very close, his hand just withdrawn from my hair. "Your hair is so soft." At this point, I was in full panic. I looked around and saw a family with 2 small children nearby. Without thinking, I walked toward them. "Excuse me, could I walk with your family to the rideshare area?" I asked. "That man keeps following me." The woman looked towards Frank, then nodded and said I could come with them. Frank stood at a distance, still smiling, but he didn't dare come closer when he saw me with the other family. I thanked them and quickly called an Uber, leaving the airport. When I met Nick, I was so scared, I burst into tears and told him everything. I had been too panicked to call him earlier. The rest of my trip with Nick was very happy. Our relationship progressed beautifully. I thought the incident was over. But a few months later, while scrolling through Instagram, I saw a follow request from an account named Frank_Ohio_62. The attached message had only 3 words, "Miss me." I immediately knew who it was. I locked my Instagram account right away and never reopened it. Although the fear lingered for months afterward, I learned an important lesson about caution and being more assertive in dangerous situations. When I was 7 years old, I often woke up in the middle of the night, especially during the winter months. The weather was cold, the wind whistled through the door cracks, and the wooden house my family lived in often creaked at night. One night, I woke up again. I heard a sound and saw a faint light coming from the hallway. I got out of bed, quickly threw on a jacket, and slowly walked out. Downstairs in the living room, the light from the TV cast a dim glow on the snow-covered carpet near the window. I was about to go down to turn off the TV when I was drawn to what was on the screen. It was an animated show I had never seen before. The two main characters, a blonde girl and a wide-eyed boy, were climbing into a glowing sleigh piloted by a Santa Claus-shaped robot. Together, they flew over fantastical places, from snow-covered pine forests to gingerbread villages and cities bright with Christmas lights. The background music was gentle, shimmering like distant bells. I sat down and was completely captivated by the show. I only turned off the TV when the program ended and quietly crept back to bed. From then on, I started waking up at that exact time every night. It was almost instinctive, and every night the TV was already on. No one else in the house knew. I felt like I had a small privilege to sneak watch this show. It felt like my own secret Christmas gift. But then, one night the program didn't end as usual. The colorful scene gradually became somber. The night sky covered the screen, and the sleigh slowed down, stopping in the middle of a forest blanketed in white snow. The main characters, the boy and the girl, turned to look at each other, their faces anxious. They both wanted to go home, but the Santa robot suddenly let out a delighted laugh. "You kids aren't allowed to go home." The screen went black, and the program ended. I was dazed for a few seconds before turning off the TV. I went to the bathroom before returning to my bedroom. When I came back, the TV was on again, but it was nothing but static, with a shrill, grating noise. A chill ran down my spine. I quickly turned it off and ran back to my room. The consecutive days of staying up late to watch TV left me feeling sluggish at school. I couldn't hear anything during class, only hoping for recess so I could slump onto my desk and sleep for a bit. One day, during recess at school, a girl I had never spoken to before pulled me aside. Her voice was unusually deep and serious. The playground. "You know that after 9 p.m. is the time of the dead? If you stay awake, they will find you." Before I could ask her anything, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing still in the middle of the schoolyard. That night, I woke up again. But it wasn't like the previous times. I felt like someone was pulling me awake. I walked out to the living room. The TV was on as always, but the familiar show was gone. There was only the chaotic static screen, the grating noise drilling into my ears. I walked over to turn it off, but as I turned my back, the static volume increased. The TV turned itself back on, and the image flickered rapidly. Then the main character boy from the show appeared. His eyes were no longer clear, nor his smile bright. He was inside an iron cage, his head bowed. Bang! He suddenly slammed forcefully against the inside of the screen. I screamed in surprise and backed away. He repeated the movement, each time more violently. Then he pressed his face close to the glass. "Let me out! Let me out! Do you hear me?" The screen showed static, then flashed back to show the boy's friend, the girl. She was also locked in an iron cage. The girl reached a hand toward me. "Hey, come here and let me go. Please." The very next second, her face stretched, becoming distorted. Her eyes were sunken and pitch black, and her mouth widened all the way to her ears. "You should be me! You should be in here instead of me!" I screamed, rushing up the stairs to the second floor. I ran to my parents' room and pounded on the door for help. But strangely, they slept soundly, not responding, even though I shook them until my arms were tired. Just as I was about to burst into tears, A laugh echoed from the living room. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I recognized it as the Santa robot's laugh. "Your turn, little one. I'm coming to get you." I ran back to my room, quickly hiding under the covers, trembling violently. I suddenly realized I was still clutching the remote control in my hand. A thought flashed through my panic. They appeared from the TV show, so all I needed to do was turn off the TV. I jumped up, pointed the remote toward the door. The moment the horrifying robot pushed the door open, I pressed the power button. In an instant, everything vanished. There was only my own ragged breathing. I curled up under the covers, motionless, until I was utterly exhausted and drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I told my parents everything. They just looked at each other and laughed. "You were sleepwalking last night. You were sitting in the living room giggling all by yourself." I didn't know what to say. If it was a dream, it was the most real, most terrifying dream I had ever experienced.
Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community, let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories.
My name is Aliana. I'm 27 and I live in Chicago. Usually I don't believe in paranormal stuff or urban legends, but what happened last month, I honestly don't know how to explain it. I had to travel to Galena, Illinois for a 3-day business trip. Instead of booking a hotel, I rented a small house on Airbnb so I'd have a quiet place to work. Plus, I brought my dog Max along, and he needed a little space to run around. The house was vintage, with a classic old-school design, but everything seemed fine at first. The hardwood floors were polished, the furniture was neat, and the place smelled like scented candles. I had 0 complaints. On the first day, I took Max for a walk around the house to get him settled. Max is usually high energy and curious about everything, but this time was different. When I tried to lead him up to the second floor, he stopped dead at the bottom of the stairs. I gave his leash a gentle tug and called his name, even offering him his favorite treat, but he wouldn't budge. Max just stood there, staring intensely at a spot on the stairs. The hair on his neck was standing up, his nose was twitching, and he let out a low growl like he was warning me about something. I left Max downstairs and went up to check things out. I lifted the rug, knocked on the banister, and looked around, but I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. Later that night, as I was walking around, I took a closer look at the house's layout. Right behind the stairs, there was a small door built into the wall. It was locked from the outside and looked like an entrance to a basement or a crawl space. What struck me as odd was that the light switch for that room was on the outside wall, and it was switched on. I knelt down and looked through the half-inch gap under the door. I could see a faint yellow light glowing from inside. I figured the owner just forgot to turn off the storage light, so I flipped it off and went to bed. But I couldn't stop thinking about how weird Max had been acting. The next morning, I decided to investigate a little more. I opened the camera on my phone, hit record, and slid it through the gap under the door to see what was inside. The video just showed a corner of a ceiling with dark wood. Nothing special. I tilted the phone back and forth, but the angle was too limited, so I pulled it back out. Right then, I heard a noise from behind the door. I jumped back, my eyes locked on the handle. It sounded like someone was turning the doorknob from the inside. They twisted it a few times, and then stopped completely. I immediately called the host. "I'm sorry to bother you, But is there anyone else in the house? Or is there another way into that storage room behind the stairs? That's just a storage area leading to the basement, she said. There's no other entrance, and I'm the only one with a key. Why do you ask? I told her what I'd heard. She insisted it was probably just the wind or old pipes. Sometimes the heating system makes weird noises. It's an old house, please don't worry about it. I thanked her and hung up, but I still felt uneasy. I called my best friend and told her the story. She suggested I try recording the inside one more time. I did exactly what I did before. I turned on the camera and slid the phone under the door. This time, I lightly knocked on the door 3 times to see if I'd get a reaction. Right after the third knock, something with incredible force snatched the phone right out of my hand. It was pulled into the darkness so fast I didn't even have time to react. I screamed, and Max started barking like crazy. Once I stopped shaking, I used my work phone to call the host back. I frantically explained what happened. You need to come over here right now. My phone was pulled inside and I need to get it back. The host arrived about 20 minutes later. She unlocked the door, turned on a brighter light, and we walked in together. It was just a small room with steep wooden stairs leading down to a basement. The ceiling was low, the walls were bare brick, and it smelled damp and musty. My phone was lying face down on the 3rd step. I picked it up, and luckily, it wasn't broken. The screen was still on, and everything seemed to be working fine. I looked around one more time. There were just a few old cardboard boxes in the corner, and an old furnace. There were no secret exits, and no windows. It would have been impossible for someone to be hiding down there. The host promised me again that there was nothing to worry about. We went back upstairs. I thanked her and she left. But I still felt sick to my stomach. I took my phone to my room, my heart still pounding. I opened the video I had just recorded. My heart practically stopped. The beginning of the video showed the blurry motion of the phone being jerked away. Then, it lay still on the steps for a moment. But then, the camera slowly began to rotate. It was slow and deliberate. It pointed straight up at the ceiling. Next, the phone stood up on its own. It looked as if an invisible hand was lifting it, holding the camera steady toward the door for several seconds. Finally, as if it had been hit by a heavy punch, the phone flipped backward and landed face down. The screen went black. I sat there frozen. My whole body went cold. I couldn't wrap my head around what I was seeing. In the video, the phone ended up with the camera facing down. That means when I picked it up, it should have been lying face up. But when I found it, it was face down again. Something had flipped it over after the recording ended. I didn't feel safe in that house for another second. Not knowing what was there was scarier than facing an actual intruder. Even though it was dark, I packed my bags, checked out early, and found a hotel. After I finished my trip and got back to Chicago, I shared the story and the video online. The post blew up. Some people believed it was a ghost or a spirit. Others thought there must be a hidden crawl space I missed. Some people accused me of faking the whole thing for views. I can't prove anything, and I don't have a logical explanation. But I know what I experienced. Max felt something that human eyes couldn't see, and my phone caught a glimpse of something that shouldn't be possible. Now, whenever I book an Airbnb, I do a deep dive into the reviews and the history of the place. And most importantly, I watch Max. I will never stay in a place with a locked door that leads to nowhere again. Inspired by a true story, in late 2023, Sydney, TikTok nickname Sid.Lane 2001, posted a video of herself and her sister staying at an Airbnb rental. There, her dog behaved strangely, refusing to go up the stairs and staring intently at a single spot. Sydney discovered a locked door behind the stairs with light leaking through the gap. When she reached in with her phone, the device was pulled inside, recording unusual movements before being slammed shut. The landlord then opened the door and retrieved the phone. The incident went viral, sparking debate over paranormal theories, hidden spaces, and staging. Living with someone you aren't close with is always a gamble. My name is Chester, and I'm 29. I shared a rental house in the suburbs with a roommate named Parker. We weren't really friends, we just paid rent together. Parker was a strange guy. He spent most of his time online, specifically in the dark corners of the internet that normal people never visit. It all started late one night. Parker was excited to show me a new dating site he found on the deep web. He called it a place for perfect soulmates based on very specific interests. When he turned his laptop screen toward me, I felt a cold chill run down my spine. The profiles on that site didn't use real names, only bizarre nicknames. Parker showed me a profile for someone named Petunia. When I read her bio, it made me feel sick. It said, "I need to be let inside. I can't stop scratching until the pain stops. The pain keeps the bad thoughts away." Her listed hobby? Listening to people chew. I told Parker that this was insane. I told him the photos didn't even look like a real person. But Parker just laughed, and his eyes looked wild with excitement. He muttered that Petunia was the most perfect girl in the world. That night, I discovered something terrible. Parker had used my photos to create a profile and flirt with Petunia. He claimed it was okay because I looked trustworthy and my photos were public anyway. I was furious and demanded he delete them immediately. He agreed, but the smirk on his face told me it was already too late. A few nights later, someone knocked on our door. It was well past midnight. I went to open it and froze. Standing there was a girl, if you could even call her that. She wore an old-fashioned dress and stood in an unnatural, crooked way. The dim porch light hit her pale, dry skin. I felt a powerful, uncanny valley sensation. She looked human, but every detail was wrong, from her slow, mechanical blinking to her stiff smile. "I'm here to see Chester," she said. Her voice was raspy, like sandpaper rubbing together. I went cold. "I'm Chester, but I don't know you." Right then, Parker rushed out of his room. He looked at her with pure lust and admitted he was the one messaging her. He eagerly invited her inside. As she walked in, her legs moved like her bones didn't fit together quite right. She whispered that she was very tired and wanted to be alone with Parker. Watching Parker lead her upstairs made me feel a deep sense of dread. I hated that my identity was being used for something so creepy. Once they were behind his bedroom door, I noticed her purse hanging on the coat rack. A bad feeling told me to check it. I reached inside and started looking through her things. At the bottom of the bag, I found a stack of IDs. There were at least 5 of them. They all had photos of different women with different names, but they all had one thing in common. They all looked slightly off, just like she did. I shivered and texted Parker. "There are a bunch of fake IDs in her bag. Something is wrong, get her out of here." He replied instantly and sounded very angry. "You're being stupid. Calm down and stop being rude to my girlfriend." I decided to go upstairs to have a serious talk with him. As I passed the shared bathroom in the hallway, I heard a strange noise. It was a cracking sound, like eggshells being crushed. It was followed by the sound of frantic, wet scratching. The bathroom door was slightly open. Through the crack and the reflection in the mirror, I saw Petunia. She wasn't the girl from before anymore. She was scratching her neck, and big pieces of dry skin were peeling off like onion layers. Underneath the skin wasn't red meat. but a gray, slimy material. Her jaw hung down way too far, opening all the way down to her chest. I pulled out my phone and started recording. Through the camera lens, the creature suddenly stopped. It didn't turn its head normally. Its neck twisted 180 degrees backward. Its eyes, pitch black with no pupils, looked right into the camera. It saw me. I dropped my phone, and my heart felt like it was going to explode. I ran back to my room, locked the door, and tried to catch my breath. I couldn't just sit there, so I gathered my courage and knocked on Parker's door. He opened it, and his face was red with rage. "Are you stalking her?" Parker yelled at me. "Parker, listen to me. She isn't human. I just saw her in the bathroom. She was peeling. She's a monster." Parker looked at me like I was a mental patient. He pointed to Petunia sitting on the bed. Now, she looked normal again. She looked at me with that stiff smile, gently scratching the back of her hand. "She's my girlfriend," Parker roared. "Accept her, or get out of this house right now. I'll call the cops if you keep filming her or stalking us." While Parker was screaming at me, I looked at Petunia behind him. She started to change again. Her shoulders hunched up high, and her ribs started poking through her thin dress. She opened her mouth and made a rhythmic clicking sound, just like the chewing interest in her profile. She looked at me with a mocking expression, as if to say, "He is mine, and you can't save him." Parker kept yelling ridiculous things about true love, completely blind to the monster that was slowly surrounding him from behind. I didn't wait until morning. I knew that if I stayed, her hobby of peeling skin or listening to chewing sounds would be used on me next. I grabbed my essentials, took my car keys, and ran out of the house while Parker was still screaming threats at me. I don't know what happened to Parker after that night, but I want to warn everyone, never touch the dark corners of the internet. Sometimes the thing you invite home is not a human being. I am still haunted by every detail of that night, a cold, windy evening 10 years ago. At that time, we were just mischievous 12-year-olds. Me, Sam, Lisa, and Matt. Before that, we had one more member, Max. Speaking of Max, he was once my close neighbor, but disappeared one rainy day without a trace. The police searched everywhere, but the case went cold. A year had passed since Max's disappearance, and Sam was the one who sparked the idea of exploring the mysterious house of Mrs. Martha, the woman who lived alone at the end of the street. People said she had lived there for many years and knew how to use incantations. Those rumors became the inspiration for us to prove that it was all nonsense. But there was more to it than just curiosity. I remember Max once told me that Mrs. Martha had stared at him for a long time from the window when he passed by her house. Since then, I couldn't stop thinking, could she be connected to Max's disappearance? I immediately agreed when I heard the suggestion from Sam, Lisa, and Matt, though I reluctantly followed. That night, Mrs. Martha's house loomed like a ghost in the dark. The wooden walls were rotting, the windows covered with dark fabric, and an eerie silence hung in the air, causing us to hesitate. Sam quietly opened a basement window at the side of the house, and the group crept inside. Inside, it was pitch black, and the air was heavy as if no one had lived there for many years. The air was thick, and every step echoed eerily. Black and white photos hung on the walls, but they were all faded and hard to make out. On a shelf, I saw strange jars filled with dark liquid, each etched with the name of a child. My hand trembled as I touched the jar with Max written on it. In a small room at the end of the second-floor hallway, I found something that shattered all my doubts. A wooden toy ship, the gift I had given Max for his 5th birthday. Around it were other toys I recognized as children's belongings. My heart tightened, and a flood of questions overwhelmed me. Lisa entered, her eyes wide with panic. "We should go," she whispered. "No," Sam said. "We need to find more. She's definitely hiding more terrifying things." Suddenly, a raspy laugh echoed from behind. "Get out of here," she said, her voice seeming to come from somewhere far away, although she was standing right in front of us. We panicked. Sam shouted, "Run!" and the whole group rushed out of the room. Behind us, Mrs. Martha's slow footsteps drew nearer and nearer. Sam grabbed the door handle and yanked it, but it was useless, and he screamed in despair. "She's coming!" Lisa screamed, her eyes locked on the dark figure moving closer. In the chaos, Sam turned and ran straight for the window, yelling loudly and jumping out. I ran to him, only hearing the sound of glass shattering. When I looked down, I saw Sam's lifeless body on the ground, blood spilling around him. "The secret is not for the curious," Mrs. Martha's voice echoed again. The sound of footsteps pounding through the dark hallway made my panic worsen. I had no choice but to run, not caring about direction, and then thud. I stepped on a loose floorboard, and beneath it was a dark, narrow space, just wide enough for someone to crawl through. "Here! There's a way out!" I shouted, my voice hoarse with fear. The group immediately rushed to me. Matt and I struggled to lift the floorboard, but it was stuck as if something underneath was holding it in place. Matt quickly searched for something to pry it loose. Matt fumbled around in the dark room and found an old oil lamp on a shelf. With a bit of light, we quickly took turns pushing and prying. As we struggled with the board, we heard footsteps coming from the stairs. That voice wasn't loud, but it reverberated throughout the house, as if coming from every corner. The raspy voice was like a curse. "Don't think you can escape. The darkness will keep you forever." My head spun. Lisa began to sob uncontrollably, clutching my hand, while Matt froze, his hands trembling around the oil lamp. I used all my strength to kick at the board. Finally, the board popped up, revealing a narrow, dark tunnel below. A gust of cold air rushed up from the hole, carrying the smell of damp earth and decay. I pushed Lisa through first. She trembled, shaking her head, but there was no time for hesitation. Matt shoved Lisa down right after, and then I followed. Just then, I heard Mrs. Martha's footsteps coming toward us. Her steps were slow, but they sent a chill down my spine. I turned one last time. Mrs. Martha was getting closer, but she wasn't walking. She seemed to glide across the floor, without a sound. Her eyes fixed on me, and her mouth twisted into a grotesque smile. I didn't hesitate for a second, diving into the passage and pulling the board back into place. Darkness engulfed everything. There was no light, no sound except for our heavy breathing. The passage was narrow and low, forcing us to crouch down to move. Mrs. Martha's footsteps above us still echoed, though faint. It was like the slow, heavy beat of a heart, slow but relentless. I dared not look back, only pushing myself to move faster. We kept going, and then, after what felt like an eternity, a faint light appeared ahead. I felt as though I hadn't breathed in hours. When we crawled out of the tunnel, we found ourselves behind the house near some thick bushes. The sky outside was still dark, but the moonlight faintly illuminated the path ahead. In that moment, running into the darkness was the only safe and viable option. The people who would surely come next were our parents and the police. The police concluded that Sam died from multiple injuries. The sight of Sam lying motionless on the ground haunted me so much that every breath felt stuck in my chest. Lisa collapsed, clutching her head, her sobs blending with broken, fragmented words. Matt stood frozen, his vacant stare locked on the bloodstain below the window, his hands trembling as if trying to hold on to something invisible, to keep from falling apart. After several months of continuous investigation, the police finally uncovered the truth when they found Mrs. Martha hiding in an abandoned house several dozen miles from the town. They discovered horrifying evidence linking her to several child disappearances, including toys, clothes, and detailed journals documenting her targets. Mrs. Martha confessed that she carried out these acts due to a warped belief in an ancient ritual, sacrificing children to extend her life. According to her, the dark jars with each child's name weren't just symbols, they were part of a ritual to lock the children's souls into eternal darkness. Although the police dismissed the supernatural elements of her confession, they couldn't explain certain strange occurrences, like the disappearance of the jars or items mysteriously showing up in the homes of the victims. Mrs. Martha was sentenced to life in prison, but her story continued to haunt the town for many years. I, Lisa, and Matt, the lucky ones who survived, carried with us psychological scars that were hard to heal. I still can't forget her deep, haunting gaze that night. I'm Claire, a 22-year-old senior at Kent State. Back in my second semester of freshman year, I babysat in the evenings to make some extra cash. That ended up being both my first and last part-time job, because it was straight up traumatic. This happened 3 winters ago. The Smith's house sits in a quiet neighborhood out in the Ohio suburbs. The roof was covered in snow, and the warm yellow glow from the windows made it look super cozy. Inside, their 2-story house felt homey. The furniture was all neatly arranged, family photos lined the walls, and the wooden floors had this nice shine to them. I was looking after Max, their 3-year-old son, who was happily playing with his favorite teddy bear, his little eyes full of curiosity. I spent the evening taking care of him, feeding him, telling him stories, and putting him to bed. Max's room was small but cozy, the nightlight taking the edge off the cold outside. As he drifted off, clutching his teddy bear, I checked the baby monitor to make sure I had a clear view, then headed back to the living room. Curled up on the sofa with a book, I enjoyed the peaceful moment of a winter night. Around 1 a.m., I was startled by a rustling sound coming from the monitor. The noise was small but clear, like the sound of clothes rubbing together or someone moving in Max's room. As I stared at the screen, a chill ran down my spine. Max wasn't in his crib anymore. The boy stood in the middle of the room, his small frame motionless. His eyes were empty, devoid of emotion, staring directly at the camera as if he were watching me through the screen. My heart pounded. Max was only 3 years old. How could he climb out of the crib that high? I told myself it could be a device malfunction, but the image was too real to be just a technical issue. Grabbing the baby monitor, I headed upstairs. The wooden floor creaked under me, and with every step, the air felt colder. When I pushed open Max's door, I just stood there, stunned. He was still sound asleep in his crib. I glanced back at the monitor. Max's creepy, motionless figure was gone. Now, it just showed him peacefully sleeping. I scanned the room, everything looking normal, except for one small thing. His teddy bear, the one he'd been holding, was now on the floor a few steps from the crib. I picked it up, placed it back in Max's hand, and tried to shake off the unease. Maybe the boy dropped the teddy bear while sleeping. But why was it so far away? Back in the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. The cold sank into my skin, making my heart race. That eerie image of Max standing frozen in the middle of the room wouldn't leave my mind. About half an hour later, as I tried to relax, a loud noise came from upstairs. A child's giggles, mixed with light but hurried footsteps, as if Max were running around the room. I quickly walked up the stairs and opened Max's door. He was still lying there, fast asleep. But the window was wide open, and the cold wind blew in, making the curtains flutter. In a panic, I looked back at the monitor. The light from the camera flickered, and then suddenly, a blurry figure crossed the frame. It was taller than a child, moving so fast that I couldn't see it clearly. The next morning, I told Mrs. Smith, Max's mother, everything. She listened but seemed uneasy, her eyes awkward, and her forced smile made me feel like she wasn't too surprised. She said that Max had talked about a friend who played with him at night. This friend didn't like strangers, especially me. A chill ran through me, but Miss Smith just gave an awkward smile and said kids have wild imaginations. Then she mentioned hearing footsteps at night or finding windows open for no reason. Mrs. Smith revealed a detail that made my skin crawl. The house was built on the grounds of an old mental asylum that was demolished in the 1970s. The locals whispered that the land had issues, but the Smith family didn't believe in ghost stories. They stayed because they had never encountered anything truly dangerous, at least not until now. After that night, I decided to quit. Nothing dangerous happened, but that creepy feeling never left me, and I just couldn't do the job anymore. The Smith family decided to move a few months later. One day, when I happened to run into them in town, Mrs. Smith said that Max still talked about his friend. He said the friend was sad he left. Sometimes, Max even said he saw the friend standing outside the window, watching him. I still don't know what really happened that night, but every time I think back, I can't shake the feeling that someone's still watching me from the shadows. The cold, Max's empty eyes, and the blurry figure on the baby monitor, they still haunt me to this day. I quit my security guard job 3 years ago, but the memory of that night still haunts me. Every time I see a no signal on a screen, my heart starts pounding. In 2019, I was working the night shift as a security guard at Walmart. After 2 years on the job, I knew every nook and cranny of that place. That night, I was sitting in the security room, drinking coffee and watching NBA on my phone. The clock had just struck 2 a.m. when a loud crash echoed from somewhere in the building. It sounded like someone had knocked over a whole shelf. I immediately switched to the CCTV screens. Images from many CCTV displayed on 6 screens, covering everything from the main entrance to the hallways, from the central lobby to each individual department. I checked each angle, zooming in on areas where something might have happened. Nothing. Everything was silent. I grabbed my flashlight and keys and started patrolling from the ground floor. I meticulously checked each department. After about an hour of patrolling, finding nothing unusual, I returned to the security room. Maybe it was just a stray cat knocking over a trash can outside. I sat down, intending to go back to my phone, when I suddenly noticed something strange on CCTV number 8, which covered the best electronics department on the second floor. A faint, bluish light, like the glow from a TV screen. I zoomed in on that CCTV. Yes, there was definitely something glowing inside the store, but how could that be? I had just checked that store, and everything was off. I quickly grabbed my flashlight and keys to head back to the second floor. The second floor hallway was darker than the ground floor, with only a few emergency lights illuminating it. As I approached Best Electronics, I clearly saw the blue light from inside. I unlocked the door and stepped in. The scene inside stunned me. In the middle of the store, in front of a flat-screen TV, stood 2 people, an elderly man and an elderly woman. They stood close together, staring intently at the screen. "Excuse me, what are you 2 doing here?" I said loudly. The woman turned to look at me. Her face was wrinkled, and she offered a gentle smile with calm eyes. "This is the only program that makes him happy." I looked over at the man. He was still staring straight at the screen, unmoving. My hand unconsciously tightened its grip on the flashlight. "How did you get in here?" "We closed at 11 p.m. "We just need to watch a little longer. He really likes this show," the woman said. A chill ran down my spine from the way she spoke. The man hadn't moved or said a word since I entered. I started to wonder if he was even alive. That thought made me want to run immediately. "I have to report this. You 2 need to come out with me." My voice was stiff, trying to hide the rising panic. "Just 5 more minutes. Please. I'll call the police if you don't cooperate." I pulled out my walkie-talkie, my hand trembling as I pressed the button to call the night supervisor. While calling, I didn't dare take my eyes off the 2 people. "Jake, I've got 2 intruders in Best Electronics on the second floor. Need backup and call the police." "Roger, keep them there. I'm calling the police now." When I hung up and turned back, the 2 people were gone. I stood frozen. I had only looked down at the walkie-talkie for a second to hang up. How could they disappear so quickly? I shined my flashlight around the entire store, my hands shaking uncontrollably. My breathing became rapid, as if there wasn't enough oxygen in my lungs. I shined my flashlight all over the store. No one. I checked the storage room in the back, the employee restroom, all empty. The TV was still on, displaying a blue screen. The police arrived. They searched the entire building, but found no one. There were no signs of forced entry at any of the entrances. All the doors were still locked, and the alarm system was functioning normally. "Are you sure you saw them?" the police officer asked me with skepticism. I understood immediately. He thought I was hallucinating. "Absolutely sure. They were standing right in front of that TV. They asked to review the CCTV footage." We sat in the security room, replaying the recording from 3 a.m. On the screen, I saw myself opening the door to Best Electronics and stepping inside. I stood in the store, shining my flashlight everywhere. And I was talking to thin air. I froze, feeling like I was going crazy. In the CCTV footage, the store was completely empty. It was just me standing alone, talking to the darkness. But I swear with a God that I saw those two people. I still vividly remember that woman's voice and her eyes. The police examined the CCTV footage until morning. On the screen, the TV was indeed on, emitting a blue light. But no one else was visible besides me. I worked for 3 more months, then quit. Not because I was afraid, but because I couldn't focus anymore. Every night on patrol, I would stop by Best Electronics. The TV was always off, the store always empty. But sometimes I still felt like someone was watching me from inside. 6 months later, I read that Best Electronics had closed down. The reason: low revenue and unexplained technical incidents. They said the electronic devices in the department would often turn on by themselves at night, especially the large flat-screen TV. That department is now a bakery, but I never dare go in. Some nights when I drive by, I still see the dim light from inside. It's as if the old couple is still standing there, watching their favorite show on a non-existent screen.
I'm Steven. I live in Houston. Just signed the papers to pay for a car with my tiny office salary. Not trying to brag or anything, but it's a horror story that made me swear off public transportation for good. That night, on the last bus from work to my place, I grabbed a seat in the back row. It was just me, some girl, and the driver on the bus at that point. I leaned back, shut my eyes, and just tried to relax. It took me almost an hour to get home. The girl, annoyed, told the driver, "You can skip the empty stops, it'll save time. I gotta be home in 15 minutes. I noticed she looked like she was still in school. With all that heavy makeup and colorful clothes, she probably just came from a party. The driver replied slowly, "Chill, girl, I'm just following the rules. But your rules ain't gonna help me dodge my parents finding out." The driver laughed and was like, "This last bus ain't just for people. It's got other stuff too." That caught me off guard a bit. The girl rolled her eyes, plopped back in her seat, and started scrolling on her phone. I closed my eyes, leaned back, and tried to rest. I was exhausted, but I just couldn't fall asleep. A while later, when the bus stopped, a cold wind hit, and it made me shiver. I looked around and realized I was the only one on the bus. No one got on the bus at this stop. I zipped up my jacket, shoved my hands in my pockets, and curled up. "Why is it so cold?" I mumbled. I checked the clock and it was already past 11. Just about 30 minutes till I got home. I pulled out the book I was reading to kill some time. I turned the page, then looked up by accident and saw a girl sitting near the door in a red sweater with long, messy brown hair. Clearly, that girl wasn't there a minute ago. I looked out at the street and there was no bus stop around here.
When did she even get on? No way. This can't be the high school girl who just ran away from home. Whatever. I went back to reading. The second time I looked up, it kind of seemed like the girl was sitting closer to me, but I wasn't sure. She was sitting up straight and didn't seem to budge. I kept reading, but I couldn't focus. The air in the bus was getting colder, and I started shivering. After a few minutes of trying to focus, I looked up at the girl in the red shirt again. She was sitting way closer to me, like just 2 rows away. My heart started racing, and I felt this weird shortness of breath. I tried to shake off the bad thoughts by keeping on reading, gripping the book tight. The light on the page faded, and a dark shadow took over. That girl, she was right in front of me, but she moved without making a sound. I started gasping and slowly looked up. She was still sitting up straight, but the sweater wasn't red. It was soaked in some red stuff that smelled fishy. Before I could even react, the girl gently pushed her hair back with both hands. She pushed her hair back, and behind it, a messed up face stared at me, and she started giggling. I just mumbled some sounds, took a few more seconds, then finally screamed, letting all the horror out. When I ran out of breath, I took another one and screamed again. I kept doing that until something hard smacked my head. "What's wrong with you?" I opened my eyes, and it was that girl from earlier, holding a school bag. She was staring at me like she was judging me. I was freaking out, looking all around the bus like, "The girl in red, the girl with long hair." I kept saying it, about to lose it. I bolted off the bus, stood at the stop, and gasped for air. The bus took off, and in my seat, I saw the back of a girl in red, sitting up straight. I couldn't take anymore and just collapsed, trying to figure out where I was. It was a stop close to my place, so I jumped up and ran home, my hands shaking as I tried to open the door. I never went near that bus stop again, and I never told anyone about that creepy experience. No one would believe this, but I'm sure the stuff I felt was real as heck. I am Wade, 29 years old. I just quit my job at my old company because I didn't see myself growing there, and I wanted something more. After taking some time off and looking for a new gig, I was happy to pick between 2 companies in Florida. I love this state because I get to travel around here and visit family. The weather in Florida always makes me feel comfy and good vibes. The 2 companies I interviewed with were pretty good, and I was really excited about the chance to live and work in Florida. My finances weren't great at the time, so I decided to drive to Florida on my own for the interview. Time was tight, so I drove through the night to get to Florida in the morning and hit the interview that afternoon. I threw on a podcast story and swapped out the car's air freshener. Kicking things off with a positive vibe made me feel chill, not scared of the dark or the empty highway. All I could see on the road was my car's headlights cutting through the mist and the trees swaying in the shadows. A few hours later, I saw a guy on the side of the road, driving the same way I was. He was dressed in all black, just standing there next to his car that was turned off. The light was pretty low, so I couldn't make out his face. As I got closer, I felt like he was staring at me. In that moment, I thought about stopping to see if he was okay. But then, my actions didn't match my thoughts, and I just hit the gas and drove straight ahead. About 10 minutes later, I saw another guy standing there by himself. This guy didn't have any other cars around him. I thought something had happened to him, so I decided to pull over. When the car stopped and I turned to look, he was gone. My heart skipped a beat, and I looked around, trying to figure out where he went. There was a little trail nearby, heading into the dark woods. Could he have run into it? But why so fast? I started getting more suspicious about the guy in the black suit, feeling freaked out, so I just took off. I tried to calm myself down, but the image of the guy in the black suit kept popping into my head. I decided to stop at a Denny's for a break, thinking some food and a rest would make me feel better. I was enjoying my sandwich when my eyes drifted to the window, and suddenly, I got chills all over. The guy in the black suit was standing outside, staring right at me. He just stood there, silent and still, with those dark, empty eyes staring through the glass. I felt my blood run cold, and my breathing got heavy. I couldn't sit there any longer, so I grabbed my coffee, rushed out of the shop, and hustled to my car. I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking as I shoved the key in the ignition and hit the gas, speeding out of the parking lot. I drove for a few more hours and didn't see any more guys. Slowly, I started to feel a lot better. Maybe it was just a coincidence, and I was overthinking it. But when I accidentally glanced at the rearview mirror, I almost stopped breathing. The guy in the black suit was sitting in the back seat of my car. My heart was pounding. I screamed in panic and hit the gas. The car shot forward. I almost lost control, fumbling and freaking out trying to find the brake. I jumped out of the car, yanked open the back door, but there was no one there. The guy was gone, like he'd never been there. I looked around, scanning the quiet night, but all I could hear was the wind whistling through the trees. I felt like I was losing it, not able to make sense of what was going on. Scared and freaked out, I decided to drive to a nearby motel to crash for the night. I needed to calm down, just a safe place to think it all through. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every little sound freaked me out. I just wanted morning to come fast so I could get out of there. The next morning, I left the motel super early, drove straight to the city, and stayed away from all the empty roads. When I got to my first interview, I still felt pretty anxious. I walked into the room, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw the recruiter. He, the guy sitting in front of me, had the exact same face as the guy in the black suit I'd seen on the street. I was frozen, barely able to believe what I was seeing. Fear hit me hard, and I couldn't focus on the interview. My mind went blank, and my words came out all messed up. I totally bombed that interview. But more than anything, I felt like I was losing it. I was totally confused, not getting what was happening to me. I tried to chill out before the second interview. This time, there was no weird guy like that, so I was able to do better. Now I'm all about working on myself and my career, living the life I wanted in Florida. Little by little, I convinced myself it was all just a coincidence. Maybe I was just so stressed and anxious about the interview that I fixated on the guy in the black suit. A few days ago, I read an article about the company I bombed the interview for going bankrupt, where the recruiter had a face just like that mysterious guy I saw on the highway. The company had been dodging taxes for years and finally got busted, going bankrupt. The recruiter, Mark, was arrested for harassing women, and according to the police, it wasn't his first offense. But at night, when I'm sitting alone, I still can't help but wonder, was it really all in my head, or was there some kind of miracle that helped me dodge the danger? I'm Egan, 26 years old, and what happened that night by the lake near Blue Mountain changed me forever. Samson, my friend from college, suggested going camping near Blue Mountain National Park. He said it was the perfect place to reset our minds. Jordan, our best friend, also agreed to join. All three of us needed some time away from daily life, deadlines, and stressful relationships. I hadn't been camping since I was little, but wasn't too worried because Samson was experienced. He had picked a perfect spot, a small clearing next to a quiet lake, a few miles from the main campsites. When we arrived, sunset was gradually falling, dyeing the whole forest in an ethereal orange hue. "Hey, are you sure we're allowed to camp here?" I asked as we started setting up the tents. Samson chuckled lightly. "There aren't any no camping signs, right? Besides, this is public land just outside the park boundary." Jordan nodded in agreement. "I like this quietness. No tourists or noise, just us and nature." A fleeting sense of unease passed through me as I looked down at the still surface of the lake, but I quickly pushed the thought away. We finished setting up the two tents, one for Samson and Jordan, one for me. I always liked having my own space, even on trips like this. Afterwards, we started a campfire, opened beers, and began grilling meat. The atmosphere was really pleasant. For the first time in months, I felt the stress slowly melting away. Jordan connected his phone to a Bluetooth speaker and turned on some music. The gentle acoustic music blended with the sound of the wind through the leaves and the soft lapping of water against the shore. We sat around the fire, sharing old stories, reminiscing about college, and laughing about silly memories. In that moment, everything was perfect. Until Samson suddenly stopped mid-story and turned off the music. "Hey, what are you doing?" Jordan asked, slightly annoyed. Samson didn't answer. He stared intently towards the lake, his body tense. I followed his gaze, but saw nothing but thick darkness and the moonlight reflecting on the water. "Sam?" I asked softly. "Do you guys hear that?" He whispered, his eyes still fixed on the lake. I listened. At first, nothing but the crackling fire and the sound of insects. But then there was a sound, very faint, as if the water was being gently disturbed. "Something's in the water," Samson said, his voice tense. Jordan chuckled. "Probably just fish, Sam." But Samson shook his head. "No, much bigger. Sounds like someone walking in the water." A chill ran down my spine. "Let me see," I said, taking the flashlight out of my bag and shining it towards the lake. My flashlight beam swept across the water's surface, but I saw nothing unusual. The lake remained still, only a few small ripples created by the wind. But then, as I moved the beam further out, I thought I saw a larger ripple, as if something had just submerged. "See anything?" Samson asked, his voice strained. I didn't want to freak everyone out, so I shook my head. "No, nothing." But then we heard it again. The sound of displaced water, as if someone or something was moving underwater, and it was heading towards us. "We should get in the tents," Jordan suggested, his joking expression gone. Samson nodded. We extinguished the campfire and packed up our things. No one said anything, but I could feel the tension. Inside the tent, I tried to sleep, but couldn't. I couldn't stop thinking about what we had just witnessed. About an hour later, as I finally started drifting off, I heard a new sound. Footsteps. At first, it was distant, but grew louder, closer, heavy, and slow. Not the sound of an animal. These were human footsteps, but the footsteps were squishy, as if the person had just emerged from the water. I lay there, motionless, heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps drew closer to my tent. In a panic, I took out my phone and texted Samson. "Do you hear that?" I typed, my hands shaking so badly it was hard to type correctly. I waited, but no reply. The footsteps continued. "Sam, something's getting close to my tent." I texted again, feeling cold sweat run down my back. Still no reply. The footsteps stopped, right outside my tent. I held my breath. My heart was beating so hard I was sure whatever was out there could hear it. Then I heard breathing. I texted Samson again. "It's right outside my Before I could finish sending the message, it happened. A terrifying scream pierced the night. It lasted about 5 seconds, then fell silent. I lay there, frozen with fear. A silence even scarier than the scream. My phone vibrated. A message from Samson. "Get to the car now." Without thinking, I crawled out of my sleeping bag and unzipped the tent. I quickly scrambled out of the tent and ran straight towards the car parked about 200 yards away, not daring to look back. Finally, I reached the car. Samson and Jordan were already inside, their faces pale with fear. "Hurry up!" Samson yelled as I dove into the back seat. He started the car and sped off, tires kicking up mud as we left the campsite. "What happened?" I asked, still breathing heavily. Samson and Jordan looked at each other, fear evident in their eyes. "I don't know. We heard noises outside the tent. Then that scream," Jordan gasped out. "Did you see anything?" Samson asked, looking at me in the rearview mirror. I shook my head. number. It was right outside my tent, but I didn't see it. We drove to a nearby gas station and decided to sleep in the car overnight. The next morning, after an almost sleepless night, we decided to go back for our gear. In the daylight, the fear lessened slightly. When we got there, everything was still intact. Both tents were still standing, no signs of disturbance. Our stuff was still there. "Maybe we just panicked," Jordan said, trying a weak laugh. But Samson wasn't laughing. He was looking towards the lake, his expression serious. "Do you guys see that?" he asked, pointing down at the lake shore. I followed his finger and felt my blood run cold. Footprints leading from the lake onto the shore, large footprints leading straight to our campsite, meandering between the tents, then returning to the lake. We quickly gathered our belongings and left, not daring to look back. On the way home, no one spoke. Each of us lost in our own thoughts, trying to understand what had happened. But there was no logical explanation. When I got home, I researched the Blue Mountain area and the lake. There wasn't much information, but I found an old newspaper article from 1978 about a couple who went missing in that area. They had gone camping and never returned. Their car was found next to the lake, but there were no suspicious signs. The police concluded they might have drowned, but the bodies were never found, and that wasn't the only case. Over the years, several people had gone missing in that area. A week after the trip, Samson called me. He had researched the lake further and discovered it wasn't marked on most maps. It had no official name, but locals called it Dead Man's Pond. According to local legend, the lake was much deeper than it looked, and the thing living at the bottom sometimes came ashore at night. I've never gone back to Blue Mountain, nor have I gone camping again. I don't know what we encountered that night, but it hurt us, and I always wonder if it's looking for us. But there's one more thing I've never told Samson or Jordan. That night, before we finally left the campsite, I looked back towards the lake, and in the dim moonlight, I thought I saw a figure standing by the water's edge, watching us. It had a human shape, but it wasn't human. It was taller, thinner, with long, slender limbs. That was the last thing I saw before we sped away. And that's the image that haunts me every night when I close my eyes. My name's Alex. Josh and Tyler, they've been best buds since college. The three of us are pretty outdoorsy. We love getting out in nature. Every now and then, we ditch the city for quick 2-day camping trips out in the woods. Last time, we headed out on a Saturday morning in July, each with a backpack loaded with gear. The plan: hit 2 different campsites, one night at each. The first spot was about 2 miles off the main trail, tucked near a little stream. We made it there around 3 p.m. I dropped my pack and took a look around. Josh was already pulling his tent out, and Tyler was off gathering dry wood for the fire. "This place is perfect," Josh said while setting up. I nodded and started unpacking my stuff. The sun was already dipping low, and Tyler was stacking up kindling for a small fire. We kicked back, grilled some sausages, cracked open a few beers, and just let the stress from the week fade away. Then, around 8, something rustled in the bushes behind us. We all turned. Some guy stepped out. Gray, messy hair, unshaven beard. Looked like he hadn't seen a shower in a while. "Hey guys," he said. "Saw your fire and thought I'd come over." Josh glanced at me, then at Tyler. None of us said anything, but yeah, the vibe got weird fast. I asked, "Hey, you camping out here too?" The guy gave us this weird little smile. "You could say that. I've been out here a long time." He just stood there, eyes locked on the fire. That's when I noticed. His hands were shaking. "You okay?" "You look cold," Tyler asked. "Cold? Nah, I'm not cold anymore." That sent a chill down my spine. Josh got up real casual-like, said he was going to grab more firewood. "Mind if I stay here with you?" We all froze. No one said a word. A few seconds passed, but it felt way longer. and then he started humming. Some weird, wordless tune made my skin crawl. It wasn't like a song, more like a low moan, like someone hurting but trying to hold it in. Josh tried to play it cool. Yeah, well, we were just about to hit the sack. Gotta be up early tomorrow. The guy stopped humming, slowly turned his head toward Josh. I'm always here, even when you think I'm not. Then, he just turned around and walked straight into the dark. Gone. We sat there for a few minutes, dead quiet. What the hell was that? Tyler whispered. Maybe he's just lost, Josh muttered, but even he didn't sound convinced. We put the fire out and got in the tent way earlier than planned. I was lying in my sleeping bag, wide awake, listening to every damn sound outside. Eventually, I must have passed out. Next morning, we packed up and made our way to the second campsite. On the way, we swung by the ranger station to grab some water and snacks. While Josh and Tyler were inside picking out food, I stepped out for a smoke. A big old bulletin board covered in missing person flyers. Most of them were sun-bleached and curling at the corners, but one stood out. The face on it made my stomach drop. Thomas Gray, 58, missing since last September. May have mental health issues, last seen in this area. It was him, the guy from last night, no doubt in my mind. I called Josh and Tyler out. As soon as they saw the flyer, the color drained from their faces. We called the number on the flyer. Cops said they'd send someone out to check the area. Thanked us for the heads up. They told us to be careful, report back if we saw him again. Josh looked at me. Should we just head home? I shook my head. I mean, yeah, he's got issues, but he didn't seem dangerous. So we kept going. The second campsite was a good 5 miles out, way more remote, pretty much off the grid. We pitched our tent by this small lake. The afternoon went by like any other. We fished a bit, cooked some dinner, played cards, just hanging out. But once the sun went down, the vibe shifted. Around midnight, I jolted awake. That humming sound was back. Same weird tune from the night before, except this time, it was clearer, closer. It echoed all around our tent, like it was circling us. Josh sat up and grabbed my arm. Did you hear that? Tyler was awake too. We just laid there listening. The humming would stop, then start up again. It's him, I whispered. How the hell does he know where we are? Beats me! I reached for my phone to call the cops. No signal. That creepy hum kept going all night. None of us slept a wink. By morning, we were done. No way we were staying another minute. As we packed up, I noticed something. Footprints, all around our tent. We didn't waste any more time, just grabbed our stuff and hit the trail back to the car. We were about a mile out when we heard it, a loud shout from behind us. Alex, Josh, Tyler. It was his voice, clear as day, calling each of us by name. We stopped dead in our tracks, turned around, and there he was. He was waving at us like we were old friends. Huge grin on his face, like he was thrilled to see us. We ran, full sprint, no looking back, until we spotted the car, dove in, and fired up the engine. Josh gunned it down the mountain like a bat out of hell. How the hell did he know our names? Tyler asked, still catching his breath. No one answered. When we got home, we called the cops again and told them everything. About a week later, they found Thomas, but not alive. They found pieces of him in a deep cave. The medical examiner said he'd been dead for several days. Could have been the weather, could have been animals, or maybe something got to him before all that. We never went camping again after that. Sometimes Josh brings it up, says maybe we were just freaked out, tired, paranoid. Maybe we imagined stuff. But me? That one question still keeps me up at night. How the hell did he know our names?